Welcome to HortTube. My name is John Putnam. In this video, we're getting started on our late fall, early winter garden cleanup, we'll call it. We were out of town on 2 separate trips, and we had really gone all in on the garden this year. Well, we do that every year, but really this year we had turned this lawn space right here into a kind of a cottage garden annual planting and perennial planting. There's perennials in here as well, and turned the back grass area into a patio and just all kinds of renovations. Then we had like 800 people here for an open house. If you were here for that, this place was in its full glory. But fall, it looked great, and we just kept it going the whole fall and just we were out of town for a lot of it, but you know, I had folks sending me photos of it that was just still looked great. It looked great, it looked great. Finally, it got cold super fast, and a lot of all the annuals, of course, got knocked back. But when they got knocked back, the gomphrena and some of the other things that were out here, some of the other annuals that I pulled out this morning, the birds were still on them taking the seed. So we've given them another week or two to polish off the seed that was the rest of the seed that was on the annuals out here before we got started on any kind of cleanup. Our native perennials, we typically leave standing out here. A lot of them have hollow stems, and some things can overwinter in those hollow stems. The non-native perennial things will go ahead. As they've been, unfortunately, a lot of them have actually cracked down at the base and exploded because they were still well alive. Or they still had a lot of water content in them. They were still growing, still blooming when we went down to 22 degrees, so Fahrenheit. So that was kind of I'm hoping things come back. A lot of it was mature stuff. It's happy, healthy things. So I think a lot of it will still come back from the roots, but it was a rather rude wake-up call. But we have a lot of cleanup to do. So they're going to see some videos back to back to back. Sometimes we're going to be tearing the things out and putting some compost in place to get the ground covered for the winter. Sometimes we might cut them back. The difference is, so in this particular spot right here, I've actually got some compost coming from Soil Cube, a couple bags of Soil Cube compost, and I'm actually going to put some fresh compost along what will remain an annual border here in the front garden next week. And so I chose to pull these annuals out because I'm pulling soil up out of there. I'm going to bring weed seeds to the top. And if I bring weed seeds to the top, I really need to get some sort of mulch over it. And that can be wood chips, hardwood mulch, pine straw, pine bark, compost, doesn't matter, something that's weed free, and put a seal over top of it if you're going to disturb it. If it's an area I'm not going to prep the bed until later, I'll just cut the stuff down to the ground. You see, the difference is not disturbing that soil barrier and bringing up all those weed seeds. So some of the stuff will get cut back. You'll see that in videos. This we pulled out because we had some bulbs. We had some tulips and we had some hyacinth bulbs, and I wanted to put them, basically this entryway here, we'll put fresh wood chips in this path later in the season. It's had so much traffic on it this year. These wood chip paths are awesome. They're just awesome. They're fun to walk on. They're spongy. All the things that are on the edges of them are able to root into this material. They're just fantastic, but they do have to be refreshed occasionally. So this will get refreshed. This will look a lot better. And then we're going to have this basically entryway here that is lined with hyacinths in the front and taller growing tulips in the back. Those are all from Colorblends. So this morning we got in here and again pulled out all these annuals. We're going to be doing building 2 compost bins back here in projects over the course of this winter. I talked very early on about not bringing a lot of material into this garden, and I am getting some Soil Cube compost this week, but we're finally at a stage. A lot of the things that were planted in this garden were so small when we initially planted them that they haven't offered us a lot of organic material to reprocess back into the garden, if that makes any sense. It takes a little while. Now everything out here grows so fast, grows so vigorous, and offers so much organic material that me pulling out the annuals, cutting back the perennials, pruning the shrubs we'll have to prune in the late winter and into the spring, and all of those cutbacks, we're now going to be able to have our own compost and really create a lot of material so that we can kind of have this loop be a little more, basically using our old plants to feed our new plants on a year-to-year basis rather than bringing other materials onto the property. That's been my goal, but we did start with a lot of small plants. This project's about 4 years old, and finally things are growing so vigorously that we can do that. So we've got piles of stuff over here those all be going into the compost bin. We'll be talking through that later during the winter, but we got all that stuff out this morning. And then I started digging trenches in here for the bulbs, because we were going to do, you got lots of different ways to plant bulbs, right? You can dig individual holes and drop them into the bottom of the holes, making sure the kind of pointy end is up on most of them. Lots of bulb videos on the channel, bulb planting videos, all about tulips, all about hyacinths. You can find out all the details about all of them, how to plant them, how to maintain them in an ongoing way if you're able to in your area. The tulips are less hardy here overall. They don't get enough cold treatment typically. But we line the front of it with hyacinths, put the tulips in the back, and I just instead of digging individual holes, since I had all this open space, I just went ahead and trenched through here, and then Steph and I lined the bulbs in there, and then I put the soil carefully. I take some soil and drop it on top of them, so I don't they're still pointy end up. And once I get enough soil on them, I can dump the rest of the soil on there and pack it in. And then I'll just come through here and just rake this out smoothly after I've tamped it down a bit. I'm not trying to tamp it. I'm trying to tamp it enough that hopefully the squirrels won't be in this fresh soil, because if they are, they'll get down there and they can, wreak havoc on your tulip bulbs. So I'm hoping that I've got it packed enough and that they're down there enough that I won't have that problem. If I do, I can just put some sort of cloth over this, or a piece of metal, piece of fencing or something temporarily until they're distracted and it settles enough later. But I'm just gonna rake this back out smooth. And again, we're gonna get a load of wood chips and redo all of our wood chip paths, and then this will look crispy again. We're gonna be planting annuals right over the top of this spring. And so in the next few days, you'll see that we're going to come in here and put some fresh compost in the annual borders. Okay, the things that are gonna be annuals on a year-to-year basis. There's a pile of roots up here. If you followed this project the entire time, and there's a playlist on the channel called New House. If you followed this project long enough, there was a maple here in front of the house. When the house was green aluminum siding, and the original video from this, there was a giant maple that was out here, and it wasn't particularly healthy. It wasn't all that happy to be with a driveway and a house and all kinds of stuff. It had some issues. Decided to take it down because they're hard to landscape with. But even 4 years later, every single time I dig a hole out here, I'm pulling roots out from that thing 4 years later. It had rooted basically this entire space. You can't dig. If I find a root in one spot and you're like, oh, I got that one, I'm good for a little while. No, you're not. 6 inches later, you're gonna find another one and another one. And so every single project we do, even 4 years out, there's a pile at the end of it of roots from that maple tree. It's amazing. When that wood is that deep down in the ground and it really doesn't have access to light and as much oxygen down in the soil, it really breaks down slowly, or it even breaks down poorly when it's denied light and air. When wood is up near closer to the surface and it has air and it has light, it can break down much quicker, much easier. Plus that root wood is different than the wood that's above the ground anyway. So I think this is going to be a nice intro. We have a lot of cleanup to do. The sidewalk is a mess. Annuals are a mess everywhere. We've got leaves all over the garden. We leave our leaves in place for the most part, but there are places where they're a little too thick and we'll redistribute them. Or we'll take a lot of them over to the driveway and run the mower over it. You'll see all that in upcoming videos as we get the garden back kind of under control. It was unbelievable this summer. And anybody who came to the open house can tell you, this place was unbelievable. But when you have as many annuals, herbaceous perennials, shrubs planted pretty tightly together, there is going to be a period of time during the year where it's probably going to require a little bit of a reset. And so that's what we're going to do this week. Once we get it to that point, nothing else to do really into the spring except for start new annuals from seed and jump back in here and replant it and replant it. That's the thing. Once we get past this kind of cleanup stage, as Steph just said, you get to do some planning, right? Which is the kind of fun part about what annual border are we going to have. We had eggplants out here, and while we were gone, our neighbors were coming and grabbing the eggplants out of the front garden. They were beautiful out here as an annual. So that was kind of fun. If I missed anything here, Steph?
The fact that we pre-chilled the bulbs.
Okay, the one thing about it, the hyacinths and the tulips do need to be pre-chilled here in the deep south. We're just not going to get, hopefully we get enough cold, the soil gets down to a temperature that allows them to chill. but a lot of winters we don't. So they were pre-chilled in the refrigerator. And again, these are all from Colorblends, and that was Stocks and Struts or some Struts and I'll put it on the screen. And the tulips and the hyacinth and Purple Sensation is what's that?
And water and fertilizer.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, we can. So this soil's moist at this point, and everything that bulb needed is in that bulb for this year. We'll fertilize the entire garden with an organic fertilizer sometime in February, and we'll leave the foliage up on the bulbs, which will give them time to rebuild the bulb for next year for it to flower, if they are going to come back. We have lots of daffodils and other bulbs out here that always come back, but if these are going to come back, we have a big planting of ones from last year over here, and 2 years ago, I had thought that they wouldn't come back, and so I replanted tulips in that same spot, and all of those tulips came up through the middle from 2 years ago. So I'm hopeful. I'm thinking that perhaps the amount of organic material I have in these annual borders, the compost that we've used, is allowing the soil to maybe get a little bit colder during the winter time. It's a little more open. So I don't know if that was the reason, but all of our tulips from 2 years ago came back. So I'm hopeful that that's why I moved them to a new spot this year. Because the ones that are in the ground over there, I don't want to disturb them, because I actually think that some portion of them are definitely coming back. But anyway, this is the first video of a lot of cleanup videos that we're going to have in the next week or two. And each of them, I'll talk about why we're doing whatever we're doing at that time. And the garden, I hope at the end of it, will look a lot more crispy again. It was just spot on. But this fall period of time is for the birds, we'll call it. And that sounds like I'm saying a joke there, but it truly is for the birds. All of the fruit and the berries on everything, and all the seed on all the annuals, just leaving this stuff in place for these months during the fall and allowing the nature to kind of take the garden a little bit, allowed all those things to take advantage of it. There's part of the reason that we're gardening out here. So I let it go probably a little beyond normal maintenance that I would normally do in terms of kind of keeping it crispy looking or fresh looking, and allowed the birds to have, what they needed to get out of here before we came in here and cleaned it up. So thank you guys so much for following along.